Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 28th of April of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on Ukraine. Probably the most important update of the previous 24 hours is that the Ukrainians once again attacked the city of Tuapse, and from this area we received lots of updates. And we see that the Ukrainians once again attacked the city of Tuapse, and it seems that this was the third attack since the beginning of April of 2026, and as a result of these two attacks, the refinery of the city of Tuapse is about to collapse completely. We received lots of updates from the area fire anomalies, and it seems that the Russians stored oil for export in this area, and the Ukrainians most likely knew that the Russians have stored fuel for export purposes, and this is the reason why the Ukrainians attacked the oil refinery exactly during the previous night. As you can see, we have lots of explosions, we have fire, and we see that most likely the Tuapse oil refinery most likely collapsed or about to collapse. The Russians are saying that during the previous night the Ukrainians used 158 drones to attack the territory of the city of Tuapse, and the Russians, according to information we have stated, that they have managed to destroy almost every single drone that was launched by the Ukrainians, but it seems that several drones managed to break through the Russian layered defense and to hit the city. Furthermore, we received another video published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video we can see how the Russians are testing new anti-drone vehicle, and it seems that the Russians still haven't started using these anti-drones along the line of combat contact, but of course if the Russians begin using these drones, obviously the number of successful strikes from the Ukrainian side will reduce significantly. The sources are saying that the Russians are ready to start massive production of these type of drones. And most likely these drones would be used by mobile fire groups that the Russians will deploy through the entire territory of the Russian Federation and along main objects of critical and energy infrastructure of the Russian Federation. The Russians during the previous 24 hours also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and the sources are saying that the Russians used 123 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and again the biggest number of updates about attacks and explosions we received from the most northern parts of Ukraine. From the area of the city of Chernihiv we have a video where we can see a very big explosion that occurred after the Russians attacked another object of energy infrastructure in this area. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the city of Konotop, and the Russians attacked the territory along the border. So the Russians are very interested for some reason in the most northern and the northeastern parts of Ukraine. Some sources may say that the Russians are attacking this territory because currently the Russians are attacking in the direction of the city of Sumy, so that is why the Russians are trying to destroy the Ukraine's logistic capabilities. From the other side, as we discussed, the Russians could attack this area because the Ukrainians used the northeastern parts of Ukraine to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation, but the Ukrainians believe that the Russians attacked the northern parts of Ukraine because the Russians are preparing another offensive operation, and this time this is going to be the Chernihiv offensive operation. Today the Ukrainians published lots of very interesting updates on this matter. Ukraine is urgently building a continuous line of defense from the Kyiv reservoir to Sumy, according to General Sirotka, the chief of engineering forces of the Ukraine Armed Forces. A significant amount of resources are being allocated to build this line as quickly as possible to prevent unexpected threats to the state. And this is approximately the line, and this is approximately how exactly this defense line is going to look like. This line is going to be built from the city of Kyiv towards the city of Sumy, right exactly along the border, with a gap of from 5 to 15 kilometers from the border between the Russian Federation and Ukraine itself. And another important thing is that today several sources stated that a Russian DRG plans to breach the Ukrainian border in Chernihiv and Sumy regions. Preparations are underway to involve 200 servicemen in the Chernihiv and Shostka directions. So the Ukrainians are saying, and pro-Ukrainian sources are saying, that in coming days we might see an offensive operation from the Russian side, and the the Russians are tasked or would be tasked to improve their positions as much as possible in the direction of the biggest city in the northeastern parts of Ukraine, the city of Shostka. So everything is possible, and the Russians might try to do this. And as we discussed during the previous videos, the most important tasks of this possible offensive operation could be establish complete control over the logistic line between the city of Kyiv and Sumy, probably to get as close as possible to the city of Kyiv itself, maybe even on the distance of artillery strikes or on a distance of battle control with drones and Geran drones and so on. So everything is possible from the northern direction. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, this might happen very, very soon. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the northeastern part of Kharkiv region. During the previous 24 hours we received lots of important updates, and the most important one is that the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Zemlianky. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As we can see, the Russians continue advancing with the purpose to establish complete control over the river of Volcha, and according to this configuration of the front line and according to a current situation of the Ukrainian forces in this area, of their status and their capabilities, we believe that the Russians are able to establish complete control over the river of Volcha within the next 3 weeks or so. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sloviansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, changes were recorded. The Russians improved their position significantly in the area of the settlement of Kriva Luka, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. Just yesterday, the Russians stated that they managed to capture the settlement of Ozerne, and today pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians managed to improve their positions even further, and the Russians managed to get the river of Seversky Donets. Currently, the distance between the river of Seversky Donets and possible positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation is less than 2 kilometers, which makes this corridor completely unacceptable for evacuation and for maneuvering. We believe that due to this configuration of the front line, in coming days the Russians will establish complete control over the Seversky Donets river, something like this along this red line, and from this perspective most likely the Russians will try to cross the river of Seversky Donets in the northern direction with the purpose to outflank and to outmaneuver the Ukrainians and to attack the main defense positions of the armed forces of Ukraine from the back. So the battle for the pockets to the east of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal is also coming to its logical end. Probably the days of this direction are numbered. As for the Kostiantynivka direction, during the previous 24 hours, once again, we received lots of updates. These days, we receive lots of updates from this area, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous several days, between the 24th of April and 28th of April of 2026. And by the end of the 25th of April, the Russians cut the road between Dobropillia and Kostiantynivka physically. By the end of the 26th of April, the Russians improved their positions both in the city of Dobropillia and in the southwestern parts of Kostiantynivka. By the end of the 7th of April, the Russians improved their positions even further in the northern direction. Probably they're planning to move along these 3 lines further in the northern direction to attack the most northern parts of the city of Kostiantynivka and to attack the Ukrainian positions from behind. And by the end of the 28th of April of 2026, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Illinivka, which is located in the southwestern direction of the city of Kostiantynivka. The situation with Illinivka was confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today they stated that the battle for this small village had finished. Furthermore, the Russians intensified their attacks over the northern and the northwestern parts of the city of Kostiantynivka. Here we can see how Russians with artillery and with aviation were attacking temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. In this video, for example, we can see a logistic roads between the cities of Kostiantynivka and Alexeyevka-Drushkovka that were attacked by aviation. So everything tells us that the Russians most likely will continue offensive operation in the direction of Nikolaevka, Dovgaya-Balka, Raskoshna, and then further in the northern direction with the purpose to attack Osikova, Alexeyevka-Drushkovka. So summarizing everything, to outflank and to attack the city of Kostiantynivka from behind, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the central and the northern parts of the city without showing significant resistance to the armed force of the Russian Federation. The situation is quite complicated in this area, but we see that the Russians are pushing, and probably not so fast, but they're improving their positions from day to day. As for the Dobropillia direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded in this area. The Russians continue outflanking the settlement of Chernihiv from the north and the northeast. The Russians continue improving their positions around the settlement of Belitska, and as we understand, the Russians are tasked to establish complete control of Tseansa, the Krivorozhye-Shevchenko defense layer, so this territory, which means that in coming days the battle for this area is going to start. This is a very important defense layer of the armed forces of Ukraine, because if Russians are able to answer this territory, then the Russians from positions of this defense layer will be able to continue advancing further in the northern direction, and the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Krivorozhye. And from positions of the settlement of Krivorozhye, the Russians may continue offensive operation further in the northwestern direction, deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. And you know that it's very difficult even to project what is going to happen when Ukrainians lose the cities of Dobropillia, Drushkovka, Kostiantynivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, all these cities, because there is a very big gap between these cities and the next large cities of Ukraine. And we are talking about the cities of Pavlograd, so we can even add some line to the map to show the line of big cities of Ukraine, and this is the line, the city of Zaporizhzhia, Sinelnikova, Pavlograd, Lazovaya, and then further in the northern direction almost till the city of Kharkiv. So when Ukraine, and if Ukraine loses the cities of Dobropillia, Drushkovka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Kostiantynivka, Izum, then the Russians will answer this gap with significant number of villages, where of course the Ukrainians will not be able to show significant resistance, which means that the Russians may begin advancing through this gap much faster in comparison with the old Donbas defense line where the Russians are fighting right now. As for the Zaporizhzhia direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, probably for the first time since the beginning of the major Zaporizhzhia offensive operation, but probably during the next days we will receive additional updates. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Probably another important thing is that the Russians, right after the Ukrainians attacked the city of Tuapse, began bombing and attacking the city of Kyiv with drones. And we know that we need to understand one important thing about the Ukrainian attack on the city of Tuapse. You know that it's a rule, it's something like a diplomatic rule to mirror everything. And of course, we may say, so what the Russians can mirror on the Ukrainian attack on the city of Tuapse. The Russians attack the territories of Ukraine every single day with dozens of drones and with hundreds of drones and with dozens of missiles. But there is a very important difference between attacks that the Russians have carried out since the beginning of the special military operation and this attack that the Ukrainians carried out in the direction of the city of Tuapse. First of all, and the most important thing, that the Ukrainians managed to deal physical damage to the oil refinery, and the most important thing is that as a result of this attack of the armed forces of Ukraine on the Tuapse refinery, an ecological disaster occurred. So ecological disaster probably with significant consequences, and the Russians most likely will not be able to stabilize the situation in the Black Sea around the city of Tuapse within maybe even years. So, which means that when talking about this simple diplomatic rule about mirroring of everything, this means that now the Russians, according to this situation, most likely in the Kremlin, the president of the Russian Federation and his general are trying to make a very difficult decision how to attack the territory of Ukraine to create the same situation with ecological disaster. So this is a possible development of the current situation. So this is the reason why attacks like attack on Tuapse is a very dangerous situation. Now let's move further. Another important thing, today according to information we have, the parliament of Ukraine voted to extend the state of war and mobilization until August 2 for another 90 days, which means that the clashes on the territory of Ukraine will continue. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Western Africa. According to information we have, the situation in the Western Africa is still very far from stabilization. The Russians, more precisely the African Corps of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, currently is regrouping from the northern, northeastern and the eastern parts of Mali in the direction of the city of Gao and in the direction of the central part of the state, with the purpose and the main important purpose of Russians is to save soldiers, to save vehicles and to save control over this army. The Russians and the Mali government have a very big army on the territory of this state. But the most important problem is that this army is stretched between different parts of the state in the western parts of Africa. So that is why now the government forces and the Russians are trying to regroup with the purpose to gather all their forces together and then using a very powerful attack fist to begin the stabilization situation through the entire state. Currently, we see that there are still problems on the territory of the capital of Mali in the area of the city of Bamako. The Russians stated that on the April 25th at around 5 a.m. and 30 minutes in the Republic of Mali, illegal armed groups of different separatist forces under the general guidance and coordination of actions attempted an armed coup d'etat. At the same time, 4 major settlements were attacked: Bamako, the capital of the Republic of Mali, and the cities of Sivara, Gao, and Kidal. According to information we have, as of the end of the 28th of April of 2026, the separatists managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Kidal. The Russians are trying to regroup themselves around the settlement of Gao. So lots of updates were published by Russians, but the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes during the first hours of this, let's say, as a offensive operation, the separatists suffered huge losses. The Russians are saying that the separatists lost up to 2,500 soldiers. Later, we got report that the separatists are regrouping and they're calling their allies to intensify their activities through the state of Mali, which means that the most difficult days are just ahead of the Russian forces, the Russian African Corps, and the government forces of Mali. So let's wait and see what is going to happen next, but tomorrow most likely the clashes will continue. As for the conflict on the territory of the Middle East, the most important thing currently is oil prices. And according to information we have, during the day, the oil prices were getting closer and closer to the mark of $100 per barrel. For example, by the beginning of the 28th of April of 2026, the oil prices were on the level of $98.66 per WTI crude mark. And the oil prices were about to cross the $100 mark, and the United Arab Emirates made a very important statement. And according to this statement, the United Arab Emirates is leaving as decided to withdraw from OPEC and OPEC Plus organization. And the United Arab Emirates has announced its withdrawal from OPEC and OPEC Plus organizations effective 1st May 2026. The move comes during the largest oil supply disruption in history, as the Iran war has shut the Strait of Hormuz and cut global supply by 10.1 million barrels per day. By leaving, the United Arab Emirates is no longer bound by production quotas and can fully utilize its spare capacity, aiming for 5 million barrels per day by 2027. Analysts estimate unfettered production could eventually bring 50-70 billion in additional annual revenue. And of course, this will force the oil prices to go down. The only question that's probably everybody has, how exactly the United Arab Emirates is going to export oil. either through the state of Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is a part of OPEC and OPEC Plus organization, which means that most likely the United Arab Emirates will face resistance from Saudi Arabia, at least on the matter of export oil that is above quotas through the OPEC Plus and OPEC organizations. The United Arab Emirates can export oil through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, but in this particular case, they would be forced to follow the rules established by the Iranian side. And of course, they can export oil through the Fujairah infrastructure, through the city of Fujairah and the Fujairah port infrastructure and air export infrastructure, because this territory is located very far from the Strait of Hormuz, and most likely the United Arab Emirates believe that using this port infrastructure, they will be able to export oil through the positions of military fleet of the United States of America without any problems and so on. But of course, we need to understand that if the United States of America remain its fleets in the area of Arabian Sea, blocking the Iranian ships, Iranian tankers from export and from leaving these territories, of course, most likely the Iranian side will do the same with the state of United Arab Emirates, and they will try to blockade the port of Fujairah as well, which will lead obviously to additional escalation in this region. And of course, right after the United Arab Emirates announced its withdrawing from OPEC and OPEC Plus organization, oil prices stabilized just for a while. There was a moment when oil prices crossed 100 mark, but then oil prices dropped back. And by the moment I started making the video, oil prices were on the level between $99.88 per barrel to the level of $99.91 per barrel. But maybe during this video, oil prices crossed the $100 mark, which means that the statements of the United States, of the United Arab Emirates, haven't worked. And this is a very important situation, because obviously this can lead to another round of escalation when the United States of America will force the Iranians to unblock and to open the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, this evening, the President of the United States of America stated that the Iranians asked him, the President of the United States of America, to unblock the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible, because they're suffering huge economical and financial problems. And that's it for today. The Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.